Hello and welcome to the BI WizKid YouTube channel. In this video we've got a live session from Simon Devine, a local director at Hopton Analytics, who's going to share his experiences in UX and UI design. This was recorded for the Leeds Power BI Data and Analytics user group in May 2024. Simon has been running his business for a number of years now, and these are the key principles that he uses when creating and designing reports for his clients. Now, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, and if you do like the video, please drop us a like and a comment so we can share this content to other users. So without further ado, let's get on with this. We've got Simon Devine from Hopton Analytics sharing his key design guidelines on UX and UI design with Power BI. Hashtag Bo.
Cool. So my name is Simon Devine. I work at Hopton Analytics. I'll tell you a little bit more in one slide's time. I don't want to steal what I'm about to say. A bit of a story as to why this session is, are you happy with this? So in actual fact, what happened is Sheb said, right, can you come up with your agenda? Of course I can. Here's the agenda. Here's what we're going to say. And I sent it on an email, and the title of the email was, are you happy with this? Which was meant to be, are you happy with the agenda? Not, are you happy with what I'm about to say? So that's why this session is called, Are You Happy With This? So a little bit about...
Just brilliant.
Yeah, I was like, a little bit about me. So back in the olden days, as my kids say, I started out as a BA with an SAP client in Athens, then eventually moved closer to home. My wife was keen at the time and moved, which is to say, she said I should move closer to home or move home, but she was going to stay in the one that we bought. Then I went to an SAP partner in Dublin. Then moved to a company in Cardiff working with a product called Click. If any of you have ever heard of it, or ClickView, again, back in the olden days, good product. It was. Then joined a Microsoft D365 partner in Sheffield, and then eventually started Hopton a couple of years ago and came home eventually. So who are we? We started back in 21. Yeah, that's about right. We're in Leeds, just near or just on Park Row, Victoria in London, and in Dublin as well. We're still small, we're still quite niche, and we work with Power BI in a product called Pyramid Analytics, which is a bit big in Gen BI and other stuff, but we're not here to talk about Pyramid. I did one of these recently, and that was a Pyramid event, and Pyramid was amazing, and Power BI was rubbish. Or today, Power BI is amazing and Pyramid's rubbish. Super quick, and then we will get on. So a bit about our clients. Not very many in Ireland, good proportion in the UK, and then the majority worldwide, mostly based here. But some not. Mostly large businesses, actually, rather than the small, which I suppose makes sense. But saying that, our footprint can be small even in large businesses. But to be fair, I think that's the good thing about Power BI. That's why it's successful, right? It's pervasive. You start off with one area, and all of a sudden it's a spread. Customer industries. Manufacturing, heavy, technology, recruitment and distribution, government, defence, that sort of good stuff. None of which I can show you, which is a terrible shame because I could show you some crackers. I should say, for the most part, whether you want this or not, I'm afraid you are now here, but we're not going to do a massive amount of in-depth Power BI. You all know how to use it. This session for me is a little bit more about what good looks like and equally what good doesn't look like. So So we're going to talk about effective dashboard design. We'll talk about audience. I'm not going to preach and teach you about personas. I'm sure all know that, where it's relevant to do. Visual do's and don'ts. Everyone has opinions here. I'm sure you do. And any other ideas, which really is me saying, if I go off on a tangent, which I'm amazingly good at, bring me back. Or if there's anything which you've got an immediate disagreement with and you're like, I've got to say, speak up. Because in reality, this is what I think. So you could look at this and say, he's talking absolute nonsense. And you know what? You could well be right. So please don't look at this and think, no, I'll sit quietly, maybe it's not. And equally, if you see something and you think, actually, but what about, let's talk about it as a group. I think that's one of the benefits of these sessions, is that we can talk. Also, super importantly, I'm going to contradict myself, and that's to do with pie charts, because I've shown you 2 already, and I'm going to tell you don't use them. And then I'm going to show another one, or another 4, actually. And I think that's the thing about UI and UX and design when it comes to these sorts of things, is there's lots of you really shouldn't, but you end up doing it anyway. And that's because it's the right solution or the best solution for the particular thing that you're trying to achieve. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So how do we approach it as a business? So for us, we look to do the simplest possible thing. So we'll see some examples actually towards the end. If we go in and people say, I want one of this and one of that and one of that, and usually there's an absolute ton of stuff that they want on a dashboard or a report is really what they mean. They don't really mean dashboards in Power BI parlance anyway. And we, how can I say it nicely? We don't listen to the customer, I suppose. We listen, we understand the requirement, and then what we do is we take that requirement and convert that. And by customer, I mean end user. We take that requirement and we convert that into something that's fair and reasonable and useful. And the purpose is to make it easily digestible. We want someone to be able to look at it, just as the dashboards that we saw earlier. We want someone to be able to look at it, immediately see what they're looking for and move on. And that's really important to us. And that's because more is never more. You know, one of the things that we see, we've only been at this a few years now, and design in terms of reports ages really quickly. Some of the stuff we did 2 years ago, we look at and go, oh, that's not great. And equally, some of the things that we see other people do, like, wow, that is truly amazing. We should do that. And I think that's a real important thing. If you keep it simple, if you get rid of noise, then there's a good chance it'll age at least reasonably well. So this is where I almost start preaching and telling you my personal views. And again, ignore as you wish. Font, super important. So the amount of reports we see with mixed up fonts, you know, a bit of this and a bit of that. I mean, look, if you want to use Comic Sans, well done, great, but we won't. So we do use titles and we do stick to those, and we do use for axes and values those. DIN, I genuinely hate. However, in some instances, it can look good, generally in uppercase with a space between every letter. Sort of looks really effective, but otherwise, whoever put that in Power BI should be slapped. Personal opinions. So choose a font that's easy to read. One of the things I should have said actually is we're looking at, my daughter is dyslexic, and there's a really neat dyslexic font out there, which is heavy at the bottom. That isn't in Power BI, but I know it's possible to add fonts in there. So that's something we're looking at as well. It'd be great if fonts could be dynamic and then we could flip, because that would make it a lot easier to read. But that's something as well that's worth considering. I suppose depending upon the audience. I'm not going to read that out to you, but you get the idea. The other reason we use Sago as a font is because you've got semi-bold, and you've got semi-light as well. It's really neat. It's a nice one. Colour equally is super important. So this is a contradiction time. So colour blindness, I think, is something we've got to take into account. Is anybody colourblind here? No? Cool. So I can say the next bit without apologising. So I think it's really important, and we try and take it into account. So red and green doesn't necessarily work. Use blue and orange. Colourblind people, that shows up well most of the time. There are tools that you can use, and there are links that we've got which we can provide as part of the presentation, where you can test your reports against, you know, to see what it looks like for people. And to be fair, I know I said, well, you don't necessarily have to do it, because we don't necessarily take it into account depending upon the audience, but 10% of males are colourblind in some way or another. So it's sort of an important thing to consider, especially as you've got an audience. A way of doing colours, of course, is to use themes, and I don't need to tell anybody about that. I'm sure there's a load of really neat tools to get themes and produce them based upon your colours, and that then includes your fonts and your font sizes and all the other things. We think they're really important. Part of that for us in terms of colours is the Newton's colour wheel. So pick 3. So if we've got red, we're probably going to have there, and we're probably going to have there. So you've got your sort of, it's not really a triangle, is it? A Y. And we try and take that into account when we're working with our customers. It doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to happen. Again, you know, some of the time a brand will be something special. And if we've got to work with it, we've got to work with it. But where we can, we try and say, yeah, but what about this? And can we maybe look at not using that yellow? So that's where we go. I suppose part of it really is pick one standard. So I think it's really easy to have loads of different designs. I'm going to do this for this report, and I'll do this elsewhere. Pick one that works and stick to it. So this is a simple template that we use that doesn't look great there, but you've got white with grey, and that's it. So we always have menu down the side, KPIs or numbers on the top, detail in the middle. And there's one change to that actually. We have another section here for filters if we've got a detail page, but each and every page looks the same. And in part, we do that because we want that consistency, which I'll come on to, but we also want, from a reading perspective, that Z. People start, certainly in the West, start in the top left, go across, then go down, and then go down. So we want to maintain that view, that Z, when they're looking at it. So, yeah, consistency. Use a design and stick to it if you can. Another thing we do actually is, rather than have, and we've seen this, and I think actually we've got an example, rather than have one massive Power BI report with 74 different tabs, we have specific reports for specific purposes. These all seem really obvious, but I see some crackers, and I'll show you one of them. Obviously, it's demo data and it's not real, but I'll show you one anyway. Icons and images, we keep a folder, as I'm sure you all do, of images and icons that we use as part of our solution. So if from a marketing perspective, we call this a design book, here's what we do and here's how we do it. And it's just a good practice, I think, to have such a thing. Stick to dates. I mean, I think you probably sat there going, tell us something we don't know, but I think it's really simple when you're doing these a lot. Just say, I'll just put a date on here and a date on there and not do that. One of the ways we do this is whenever we produce a report for a client, the person who approves it isn't the person who develops it. So it'll go to someone else for peer review, and it goes to someone picky and annoying like me, who then says, that's 4 pixels out here, or that font's wrong, or this should be changed here. And the irony isn't lost on me, by the way, that I can make things look pretty. I appreciate that's coming from me, but that's one of the things that we do as a business. Clear headings, consistent units, be it currency, decimal places, commas, date formats. We try and make the audience do less work, less thinking. Yeah. So I mentioned that I may well contradict myself. Here's a good example. Don't do that. Don't give your audience something to read. If you can do that, do that. I do that loads. But it's a fair point, right? Do it like that. It makes so much sense. Another obvious thing is accuracy. So part of what we do, and I'm sure you all do the same, we check the data, we go through, we make sure the structure is accurate. It's important as well if you're using Q&A or Copilot, as it will come online. If you've not got a decent data structure, that's going to make it unfortunate to use. And we maintain that throughout our builds, as I'm sure you do. I mentioned layout. So we've got a series of templates, which I'll make sure are available to you on our website, should you want them. But it's the same format, and Chev showed you one using the same, and I did as well. So you've got your KPIs, you've got your menu KPI. So we just have one standard, keep it nice and simple. I mentioned earlier about the lining things up. I mean, in fairness, Power BI makes it really simple, but a lot of people don't do it. I don't know why. And to be fair, a lot of our people don't necessarily do it. It takes that other person to say they're not aligned properly. Now, for most people, you might think that I'm being an absolute bugger, and actually it doesn't matter. And to be fair, you may well be right. But because most people don't seem to notice. But if you've got someone who does notice things being out by a couple of pixels on one of them, then it's like, it makes your teeth itch. Is anybody like that, or am I the only one? Please tell me I'm not the only one.
You're not the only one.
Good. So I think it's really important, and it's not difficult to fix, in fairness. Don't be afraid of white space. So more is definitely not more. It's one of the things you said earlier, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And when we do it, I mean, we've got one that I won't show because it's branded and it'd be obvious who it was, but it's literally got 8 boxes. That's it, 8 KPIs in the middle of a page, nothing else. There's no selections because it serves one purpose, what's going on in our business. 8 boxes, 8 KPIs, looks all pretty with all their colours. Perfect, that's all you need. Now, obviously, that's for a specific purpose. So when they want to get into the dirty, they need more detail. Fantastic, we can do that as well. But don't be afraid of that white space. So I mentioned earlier, I'll share this via Chev, so I'll make sure it's available. But there are a heap of, color-wise as a book is pretty good in terms of using colors and what works and what doesn't. Colorblind friendly design, that's a blog post for Tableau actually, which is a bit annoying, but it's there. Colorblind test you can use, so literally you upload an image and then you've got 10 different types of color blindness, select it and see what it looks like. Sorry. And then we've got templates as well, which we can share, which are backgrounds, so that things can be lined up neat, themes and colors. So I'm running out of time, so I'll crack on. I mentioned at the start, understand your audience. I think these are pretty straightforward things. Work with the key people, understand what they want, take it away, then come back and say, what about? One of the ways we do this is, I don't know if any of you have ever seen these dashboard wireframe kits. So these are designed for this sort of work and actually for Power BI. So it's great if you've got a room with people, obviously, otherwise it's pointless. You've got your little board, you sit down and you say, right then, what is it you want? And they say, I want a chart there. And you say, brilliant. What question is it trying to answer? And what action is taken as a result of the answer? And they say, I want one of them charts. That's what it's going to be called, and that's where it lives. If they can't answer, what question is it answering and what action is it going to take, then it shouldn't be there because there's nothing for it. Equally, you can then go and put your little KPIs on, you put your number, you describe what it does, or if you want to go full KPI, you can do that. These are really neat. So there's a full suite of standard things, or there's KPI version, sorry, Power BI versions as well, to make it a little bit more something that they're used to. So these aren't mine. This isn't my idea, unfortunately, which is a shame. But you can buy these online, and there's a link to these as well. So it's 30 quid. And if it means you're going to be able to engage with customers, with your teams, and design reports that is sort of what they want, brilliant. Why would you not do it? I still caveat this by saying, just because they've asked for it doesn't mean you have to give them it, right? I think that's yes. But yeah, I can share the link of those. And then, yeah, actually, I said it there. Just because they want it doesn't mean you have to give it. And be pretty ruthless. So back in the olden days when I used to work with Click, we used to say, ask, you want to be able to answer the last question first. So if they want a dashboard or a report, what is it going to tell them? What's the main thing they're going to look at and go, yeah, okay, I can do something now. I can take that data and use it to make a decision. Because if it's just there to look pretty, whilst that's fantastic, it's potentially an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money with little value. Now, don't get me wrong, some people want these to look pretty, and when they do, fantastic. That's what you've got to do. But for me, start with the last question. What are we trying to achieve? I think that's a really important step. So, visual do's and don'ts. I'm not going to list everyone because you'll know a lot of these already. Too much is too much. Use pie charts sparingly, says the man who's used 3 so far and will use another 4. That's the best pie chart I've ever seen. Take inspiration from reality, which I suppose is saying you wouldn't do this, go for red and green for stop. So don't do that. Now, the other one I think is take the data and boil it down to something meaningful. So you ultimately we're telling stories, right? So here is Power BI, real data, question that people, a survey, how long does it take for you to decide if you want to see a first date again? These are the responses. So 30 minutes or less, 5 minutes or less, immediately, 1 hour or less, don't know, more than 1 hour. So, okay, brilliant. It's a pie chart, so guess what? They sort of all look the same. We've brought the category description in, so it's a bit more useful, but it's still not great. So What does that tell us? Really, it tells us maybe in that instance, pie charts aren't the best option. Maybe we do a bar chart. Okay, that tells us a bit more. So we can see there that 30 minutes or less is most people. 20% of people decide within the first 30 minutes, and then within the first 5, and then immediately. Okay, fair enough. But we could categorize these, right? So those top 3, they could be less than an hour if we were to bring them together. And then 1 hour or less and more than 1 hour could be, sorry, those top 4. And then, so then what we can do is we could categorize and say, right, so less than an hour. So 55% of people decide whether they're going to see a first date again within the first hour. So now we've taken that load of information that wasn't easy to read and we condensed it. So, okay, great, this is good, apart from we're including don't know, because if we don't know, it's not really that relevant to the results. So if we get rid of that now, we can see 1 hour or more, 35%, 65% of people then decide whether they're going to see a first date. So we've taken information that was loads of it, and actually we've got insights. I mean, all that really says is it's a minor miracle I've married. But the point is we can say that because we condensed that information down and we've got some useful information out of it. Other ones that I would expect you to disagree with. Well, not the first one, consistent scales and axes. I don't think anyone would say, no, we mess things up by changing those. Start from 0, potentially a contentious one, because sometimes you don't see the information. But I think, again, that's a perfect example of one that I say and don't necessarily follow. Use filters. So just like we saw on the first date thing, especially if we can take data out and make it useful, we're not hiding anything or changing stuff, but if we can do that, we should. And use drill downs. Finally, nearly, don't worry, it won't be much longer. Collect feedback. So we talked about, and Sheb and the team were saying, you know, one of the things we want to do is make sure that it's used by the business, and it's not always easy to get, well, you didn't say this in fairness, but adoption, we've got to push this out. And I think the easiest way to promote the use, one of the things we work on is taking reports and making them useful in an organization and adopted. One of the good ways, use tools like this, get feedback, find what works, find what doesn't, get input from stakeholders. The easiest way we manage to implement tools like Power BI in our clients is start at the top, create that exec dashboard. I know it's sort of almost feels like the wrong thing to do. So we're building it for the few rather than the many. Yep, because you build it for the execs, they then say, that's brilliant, that we need one in this team or that team or the other. And then they start relying on the data. They bring, you know, people start to bring Excel spreadsheets, that's great, but show me it in Power BI. So start at the top and it does flow down. Keep up to date with visualization best practices. And I suppose a pretty obvious, iterate. So build, then build some more. So part of the work we do, and I think part of the reason we're successful is we don't do big bangs. We'll agree something, we'll come up with a design, we'll start to bring in data, we'll ask if it's what they want, and we'll keep iterating. So each version, there'll be 10, 15, 20 different versions. And I think that's a good thing. So super quick. This will be fun. So how am I going to get this on there? Can I drag that one of these ways? Right, demo data. Now, again, I come back to the point. If you're looking at this saying that looks similar to ours and we love it, brilliant. It's a personal preference.
That one.
Yeah. Do you love it?
That's how I build mine. Yeah.
Great. I think it's fantastic too. So what's wrong with this for me? I mean, Brill, page navigation. Okay. There's a few things. These ridiculously rounded corners, I have a big issue with. Personal preference time, right? I think these buttons are massive, and I think it's obvious it's a page navigator, or it would be if you put it where page navigators belong. We all use systems, Outlook, and everything. Where's the menu? It's over there. So this, I mean, okay, I think this is sort of cool, but maybe it's because I'm old. I find that a bit strange. Then when we come to the data, so this makes my teeth itch. These things, so we've got boxes in boxes. We've got different color blue. Now I get what that's doing because this is standard Power BI, right? So that's showing that the lighter the blue, the lower the number, but does it really? I know you can do that and it can sort of look sexy at times, but there's nothing to actually explain that that's what it's doing. I hate it. There's my mouse. Tell me if you see a mouse on the screen. Now this isn't too bad. There's still, if you notice, there's still inconsistencies, which you can't because the screen's not great, but inconsistencies in size there. Okay, that can be cool, but that really doesn't give us anything there. And I think they're real busy. And I think that's the thing that you could probably do without. Yeah, I don't think it looks horrendous. I just think it could look better. Come on, Devine. Yep. So this is from the 90s, clearly. So inconsistencies everywhere. I talked about white space not being a bad thing, and it isn't a bad thing, but you know, we could bring that down there. The numbers are really small, so you can't even see them. So what are you actually looking at? And we're in, you know, 0.2 million. Okay, so what is that actually showing us? So this is a good example of don't do it or do it differently. Use the design we've talked about. Use that Z, not that. Come on. Oh, I'm never going to get rid of that, am I?
We have to reduce the screen size. Yeah.
So what, and again, this is all personal preference. So you might look at this and say, nah, it's terrible. But what can you do then? So we sometimes offer help. So guide users through a design. So it'll prop up here and it'll say, this is what this does. This is what that does. Here's our whatever, and you move on. And then we're into the view. So we still have the KPIs. We still have options. We can go back if we really want and ask for more help if we're not sure, or we can look at the data. We've got the menu in this one at the top. It's webby, nice and simple to use. But you can always go back and get that help if you want to. So in actual fact, that's pretty busy, but it's done in a way that we think anyway, it's not too upsetting.
How are you going to help with those separate pages?
Bookmarks and images, super simple. Equally, you might have So this is just a recruitment one. Same thing, menus along the top, KPIs there, and then you're into the detail, and it sort of takes you. So you get to see, you move along, you can make selections here, and you start to see the data. I think that's pretty important.
I don't know, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I use mostly page navigation sometimes. So I wanted to know what's the actual difference with bookmark. Page navigation and bookmark.
All right. So you're doing actions, but bookmarks allow you to do, I guess, you know, things like actually on the other one. I'll show you in this next one. Come on. So nice and simple, same principle. Menu, KPIs, selections. So these are just actions which open up other pages. Yeah. But if we wanted, rather than do that, or as well as, we can do these little help, and all these are bookmarks that hide and show certain things. So actually, if you could, which you could arguably, show everything that's on a page, you're going to have an awful lot of noise, because there's going to be 4 of these, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects, which actually is really dirty, but it works. So that then allows us to say, right, yes, there's the user, that's how they do that, that's how they do that, that shows them something there, that shows them something there. And the purpose of us doing it like that, and why we do this sort of help, is so we can roll these things out without tons of training. We talked about that earlier, reduce the amount of training time needed. Yeah.
So if you're using bookmarks, how do you deal with charts talking to each other with missing word here? Basically, if you put a filter on one chart, all the charts are being changed by default.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you then change a bookmark to something else, the filters from previous bookmarks still holds, and they are interfering with the ones from the new bookmark.
Yeah. So
how do you deal with that?
You can disable the interactivity if you want, can't you? So you can say these things are impacted. I'm right, I'm not. Tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah. And the other thing is, I suppose, use them sparingly. So bookmarks for us, we've got into a right pickle before, where we do certain things, and actually, like you say, then we end up making selections elsewhere, and we don't want to do it. But you can switch off the interactivity.
There's the other thing about the bookmarks as well, where you can check the data option.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I just ask, you navigate from the front page to this with the help thing. I've only ever used bookmark like within the page itself.
Yeah.
How have you gone from a main page to populate a help bookmark? Is there another setting within there that?
No, so it's fiddly, but you can have a bookmark that opens something on another page, and then make selections appear or hidden. So if I were to come back to this one, come back to this one and start this up again. So next. So all these are actions that have bookmarks, right? Next. So that bookmark opens another page and then shows whatever I've unhidden selections that I've made. So you can do that sort of thing. Now, it's not perfect by any means. So I just go next, finish. I like that. That's brilliant. And go back. I've still got this here. Yeah. So that's why I say, if you can use them sparingly, but you definitely can have things flow and work, which is cool. So I think I'm 39 minutes. Good timing. Any easy questions? No? Cool.
So I've got a quick question. What's this visual on the right-hand side?
Cool, isn't it?
What type is it?
It's 3D BI. It's an add-on. Yeah, which you can get. I mean, you don't have to do that. So we do that in a few ways. Some people, well, let's be honest, this is super sexy in demos. In terms of usability, when it comes to warehousing, what we do more of is 2D. So 2D warehouse, multiple locations, multiple floors, and then drill into the detail. But it's pretty neat to be able to say, I want to see all my, gosh, I should have worn my glasses, all my stock that isn't optimized. And now I just want to look at my slow moving stock. So now what I can see is all the stock that's slow moving but is near my pick faces. Move it to the loos, move it away from where things are happening. In principle, you could do 2D, and in fairness, you probably would use it 2D, but it looks sexy, doesn't it?
Just a point, I always, when I'm designing, I've always got a little dilemma in my head, whether to use the entire frame or just bring it in by 5 picks or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I can see you have there, but what do you do both, or do you just always bring it in?
So
Because I always think like on a background like that, it doesn't matter, you might as well just.
you might use it all. Yeah, I mean, so we tend to bring it in, but that's because there's still users out there that have that screen resolution. And again, it's only a little bit picky, but if that takes up the full screen, then you've got a line right on the border, and I can't do with it.
Yeah.
So we tend to bring it in a bit. Sometimes we don't. So if we're working with a client and they're high tech, or they've got loads of money and they're all super sexy stuff, we won't bother with that, but we tend to try and bring it in.
Sometimes find that the snap to grid doesn't work as well as it should. Sometimes some of the visuals don't snap to grid. There's bits overlapping and things, which is a bit annoying.
So that's because, in my experience, that's because of all these, whatever you call them. What do you call these things that pop up downside when you're developing? What are they called? What's their real name? Panes. Yeah. So all the panes. So if they're the standard width, which is like, I don't know, 186 pixels each, then generally they snap and they have like 10 pixels between. But the more panes you show, the more they don't snap to grid, and you end up with, and in fairness, I think that's why we see a lot of inconsistency in objects, is because people develop it, they start in one, then they show all the panes to do different things, or make one big because they can't see the data, and then it makes a mess of it all.
Another thing that annoys me, when you group more than one thing, it doesn't snap to grid, you have to do them one by one, but that's Microsoft.
Yeah, but yeah, we get rid of all them, or at least minimize what we don't need and keep them at the smallest width, 186, and then everything at least snaps to 10 pixels, which is what we want.
Cheers.
Nice.
What does Pyramid do better than Power BI?
Well, in this room, nothing. It's a different tool, enterprise. Not that this isn't, but enterprise, centralized data set, costs a load more. But I think you all know one of the things that's said against Power BI is that it's cheap to get started. It's really expensive to get wrong. Pyramid's just really expensive. Visually, it's awful. I shouldn't have said that. We might remove that section. Visually, it's not as good as Power BI at all. You can't do anywhere near as good things. And the other thing, I think the big difference for a developer is, you know, in Tableau, has any of you used Tableau before? You know, in Tableau, you build all your individual visuals and then you bring it into a report or a dashboard. pyramid is the same. So you discover, you build all your visuals, and then you build it into a report or you publish it. And I think one of the benefits of Power BI for building quickly is that you don't have to do that. You're building your visuals as you go, and that's cool.
So you mentioned before at the beginning where you sort of set your fonts and you have certain font sizes. So do you utilize the theme?
Themes. Yeah.
Quite a lot. Do you have a theme for each?
Yeah, I think it's important.
And that works pretty well. Yeah.
Pretty well. I mean, I think the early theme, and I'm talking 2 years ago, but we all know the speed of change of Power BI. It's annoying at times. A couple of years ago, you'd build a theme and you'd go into every detail, every visualization type, you'd set them, and Power BI ignored most of your settings. And I think that's got a lot better, in fairness. So we can't do it all the time, but in fairness, you know, you've got that little paint button. So you want to copy a visual, do that, change it, move on.
So, like a lot of your designs, right? Do you consider, for instance, colors of a particular company or something?
Yeah, always. Yeah. So we'll take their core color and then we'll pick a couple of complementary colors, unless they're really weird. Like also, if it's like bright yellow that's not going to show particularly well, we'll talk about how we can do something different. But generally, businesses have really well designed, really well put together branding, and actually that works really well. So we've got a client in Ireland, and their colour is yellow, but their complementary colours as a result are grey and black. Well, actually that works really well because we can put yellow on top of black, and it sort of looks good.